Hello, we are live. K-StateOnline YouTube, John Kurtz, Derek Young, K-StateOnline fame, Flando back being the production man behind the camera as always. What a setup we have here today. I'm excited for this. We've got double-barreled Iowa State, Oklahoma State action here, so if I break into song and dance, it's probably because Brock Purdy threw another interception. Just a heads up on that front. But K-State crushes Kansas today, 55-14. It's now the longest win streak in the series for K-State, 12 years in a row. This is even longer than what Bill Snyder did in Snyder 1.0, which is an impressive thing to think about. K-State has absolutely demolished Les Miles twice now. There's a lot to like about this game, DY, and I think everybody's feeling a lot better after the second half. The first half left something to be desired, certainly offensively. But I still would say, if we're going general big picture thoughts here, I mean, the game is a lot about just the gap between the two programs.
Yep.
Because I mean, Kansas was just so bad. Just
so
bad.
Historically bad. They're not well coached. I thought maybe that there would be some organization there because Les Miles. I mean, believe it or not, he won a national title at one point in his career. Believe it or not.
Right.
So you'd think there'd be a little bit more organization to it, like just as simple as telling your punter, "Hey, don't punt it to number 88." And there wasn't even that. They're just such a disaster. It's the worst Kansas team I remember in my lifetime almost. I mean that's really pushing the envelope, but it doesn't get much worse than this. I mean, Kansas State put up 55 points, and it felt like they could have had 80 because they didn't play a good first half.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was really, by the end of the game, maybe like a B- game from K-State, C+, B-, something like that. And they win 55-14 with a garbage time touchdown from Kansas thrown in there that, made up part of the 14 points that they had.
They had a garbage time touchdown last year, too, when Les Miles tried to get his son a touchdown.
It's like ineptitude. I mean, I don't. I know Kansas fans will sit here, and I've been harping on this all week. They'll tell you about this narrative that Les Miles is rebuilding the roster with high school kids because they took too many shortcuts there for a long time. I guess some of that may be true, but I would ask any Kansas fan, look them in the face and say, like, is what you're seeing out there, like, you think these guys, even if you have a better roster, like, they're going to be well coached enough to do much more than what's happening right now? Because I'm not seeing any of that. I mean, that is dreadful what they did on special teams. Like Phillip Brooks, shout out to him. I mean, the guy was great. He had 189 return yards today, along with the 2 touchdowns and 2 near touchdowns that he broke, and 100. But this is the thing, like, you can't keep kicking the guy the ball. 189 return yards, punt return yards, is more than any team had in the country coming into this game. Like, any team. Like, Phillip Brooks is now the number 1 team in the NCAA until play is ended today in return yards, and may well still be when the day is done because he cleared it by 30 or 40 yards. Like,
punt returns are pretty rare.
Yeah, I mean that's brutal. And I heard Les Miles in his post-game press conference asked about it, and he said something to the effect of, "Well, we were trying to kick some of those out of bounds." And I'm like, okay, well, you're either throwing your punter completely under the bus, or those things look straight dead down the middle, or you forgot here and you're trying to cover your tracks. I mean, Kansas is a freaking mess, man. I mean, their offense obviously is terrible too, but that special teams performance is just horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, because you said they were trying to, but I mean, Brooks wasn't lined up to the right. He wasn't lined up to the left. He's lined up in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to kick it out of bounds, you're as far away from out of bounds as you can possibly be if that's really your 10th, and they need a new punter if that's the case. Just pretty poor. And then on the coverage in general, hey, Phillip Brooks, good job, good day. It's a record-breaking day. You'll be in the record books for a long time. It's probably not going to be defeated for another 50, 70, 80 years. But at the same time, like, even the 2 touchdowns, like, he was running against air. Like, as soon as he got to the other end of the sideline, because he would catch the ball in the middle of the field or on one end of the field, and he would run to the other side, and there was nobody there. That's all it was.
Yeah, no, it was not, like, for the most part, it was not really difficult work. And, the most damning part of it all is the fact that ball gets punted to him at the end of the half. I mean, like, how you do that, I don't understand.
Put that in the bleachers.
Well, right, like, how often do you see somebody housing a kick, like, scoring on a return as the clock hits 0 at the end of a half? You never see that because nobody is dumb enough to actually do that. And no matter what the breakdown is, that's on Les Miles, whether the punter can't figure it out. And they were on, like, their second and then third string punter, and I heard him complaining about how many guys were out on their special teams unit. But, like, all the more reason to just kick it 20 yards out of bounds. Anyway.
Yeah, aim for the press box. I mean, geez,
Yeah.
it's not complicated. I will say, I mean, Kansas State scored one touchdown on offense in the first half. That's it.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Kansas offense was as good or better than K-State's in the first half. But the problem is, I mean, in the first half alone, Kansas gives up 2 return touchdowns, another 40-plus yard return. They missed a field goal, had a pick six. There was a turnover on downs. Was the muff punt in the first half too? Or was that in the second half? I mean, this is the laundry list of things Kansas did to lose this game today, and K-State obviously obliged.
By the way, that pick six, I mean, I've never seen a ball float. I mean, Justin Gardner looked like he was just in practice shagging a pop fly in the infield going for that touchdown. He made that look like, I mean, he walked in, he like jogged to the interception.
Yeah.
He literally made that look easy, and he wanted everybody to know that it was easy.
Well, it was one of like 5 moments today, and I said this on Twitter after the game, but it was like one of 5 moments where you're just like, all I can do is just tweet LOL. Like, how does that happen? Like, what are you guys doing? And look, on a serious note, I think the good news is there is a massive gap between the two programs. That much has been accentuated here, and we can talk and debate how much of that is K-State ascending versus Kansas going backwards. But the bottom line is, so Les Miles has now lost 2 games to K-State by an average of 35 points per game. David Beatty lost 4 to K-State by an average of 15 points per game. So, I mean, things are moving in the wrong direction, and it is, I would say it's because of both. I mean, it's been apparently abundantly obvious so far that K-State has the far better hires. So K-State's going like this, and Kansas, if you can believe it, is going like this.
Yeah, and what was last year's score, 38-10?
38-10.
So
yeah.
We're looking at 93-24 in the 2 games. Yeah. I will say they're probably getting out of scholarship hell under Les Miles. He's doing a good job of that. But on the field, the product's not getting better. They're not more organized. They're not more well coached. They're getting out of scholarship hell. My thing is like, great, you found a coach that could do that. Guess what? Find a coach that can do both, because you got to recruit and coach at the college football level.
Yeah, but I mean, this game offered you tons of opportunity to dunk all over Les Miles and dunk all over Kansas, and even, I mean, this is how good of a day it was for K-State. You got the opportunity to dunk all over Gavin Potter, right? Gavin Potter pulls the shirt off, spurns you and decommits and does that whole thing, and then he gets just roasted by Deuce Vaughn twice, once on the touchdown run and then once out of the open field in what just turned into an unbelievable highlight for Deuce. I mean, just perfect, just chef's kiss. Chef's kiss
the
stuff.
The funny thing about the one in the open field, too, I'm pretty sure he missed that tackle twice. Like, Deuce made him miss, and then he tried to get Deuce again as Deuce took off, and he missed him again. So he missed him 2 times on the same play.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I don't know Gavin Potter at all. All I know is the stunt that happened. But you do something like that, that's writing a check that eventually, especially when you know you're committing to the rival, you may have to cash later on, and that bill is coming due for Gavin Potter.
It might come due every year.
Yeah. But, it was a frustrating first half. And I'll be honest, at halftime, you're sitting there like, man,
a little discouraging.
What's going on with the offense? Like, they just really can't find any kind of rhythm. They tried to get Malik Knowles going early in the first half, and it didn't really work. I mean, I don't know that it's fair to say there were a bunch of real blatant drops, but it's kind of what it's always been with Malik. There's, like, catchable passes that aren't being caught, and it's like, okay. But then in the second half, man, I mean, the offense just looked... They went right down the field. They were throwing it deep. It was everything you could have wanted out of the offense because it was Will Howard like in command and throwing the ball deep on the money.
But still not Malik Knowles. It was Shabastin Taylor.
Well, sure. So, but I mean, at some point,
it doesn't matter. Yeah, if it's
the offense is moving on.
Yeah, if it's DJ Render, if it's Seth Porter, if it's Derek Hommel, if it's Shabastin Taylor, it doesn't matter. The offense is moving. Will Howard's making growth, and you guess you probably didn't see the improvement he was able to make over the 2 weeks because of the bye week. It all came crashing into the third quarter in one robust, performance. So it was discouraging from the offense in the first half. Not sure it was discouraging from Will Howard because I don't know that I saw any like glaring mistakes. The game looked a little too fast for him still at times. And in terms of like the football sense in his throws, I would say he let a couple balls flutter a little bit. When it comes to a catchable ball, it's not just ball placement too. There's a reason why you practice throwing a tight spiral because that's a more catchable ball too. And he still has a little inconsistency with that. I think the one drop by Malik Knowles in the end zone in the corner near the pylon was a little bit of a duck. I joked that if I had a shotgun in the press box, we could have shot that thing out of the air. But no, so Malik Knowles really didn't get going, and I think they tried to. But Shabastin Taylor, again, 100% caught every one of his targets. Yeah, I think he had 4 targets, 4 catches.
Yeah, he looks good.
Briley Moore, I think this is the 3rd game in a row where he's caught every target. So the completion percentages when they throw to Shabastin Taylor and Briley Moore are astronomical right now. It's kind of the flip of Malik Knowles, so you get the balance
Right.
and you get the average of college football of a completion percentage. But man, Shabastin Taylor and Briley Moore are very reliable, and it's good to see Will Howard kind of develop a cohesion and a chemistry with those two, because those are 2 of your better skill position players, and really their cohesion and chemistry this year was almost exclusively with Skylar Thompson. Will Howard never got it super on the same page with those two, so you want to rely on those 2 as your main pass catchers, and it was good to see Howard kind of get on the same page with them rather than Thompson.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, Will Howard goes 17 of 24, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns. Love those numbers. I mean, the numbers against Texas Tech were fairly inflated. I remember when we were talking about that because of like yards after the catch. But that wasn't really the case today. I mean, that was Will Howard having to put the ball on the money, and he did a really good job.
The vertical throw to Shabastin Taylor in between the 2 defenders was a great throw. I would mince a little bit on his decision there, because I think Malik Knowles was the one that actually broke free and was the open receiver, so he actually threw to the guy that was more covered, but it was such a great throw that it didn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it was a perfectly placed ball. That was an NFL throw. Like, remember, it was Tui, I think, right? It said at some point, like, Will Howard made an NFL throw, and we were all kind of like, oh, wow, in practice. I mean, that's what that was.
Yeah,
that really
and
is what that was.
And he had the same thing against TCU to Sammy Wheeler with that would-be touchdown. So there are some glimpses. I mean, we don't see it consistently yet because he's still getting used to and acclimated.
Freshman, yeah.
But the glimpses are quite well. And I do want to say this. The best thing I think about Will Howard, I know we talked about this in our chat during the game, is his poise under pressure, and his pocket presence under pressure is elite for a true freshman. He knows, and it's more about his maturity and understanding of the offense. He is a football junkie, very football smart, and he has such a good understanding of this offense already, even though what the defense can give him can cause him headaches every now and then. But he knows exactly where every one of his targets is going to be on the field at all times. So if he sees any kind of pressure, he knows exactly where to look. You don't see that from a true freshman rarely at all. And kind of compared to Skylar Thompson, Thompson didn't start really getting that to maybe the end of his sophomore year, beginning of his junior year, or when Chris Kleiman came into the head coaching job, really. So in that perspective, he's probably ahead of Skylar Thompson, but the game still overwhelms him in terms of the speed. But that's a knack that he has that's something that's really hard to be taught, put it that way.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it gives you a lot of optimism for where the offense could go, even this year. Like, we continue to see him, and it's kind of like an onion peeling back some layers of Will Howard and where he's at right now, and seeing that in the second half made me think, all right, like, we're going to start talking about Big 12 championship possibilities here, and that makes me think there is a higher ceiling than what I had previously believed before for the K-State offense, especially if they win that game next week against West Virginia. Obviously, that will really start that talk up, but
think about it this way, how hard it is to sack Will Howard. I don't know if he's taken a sack since he came in as a starting quarterback, and obviously teams are pressuring. They're trying really, really hard. He didn't get sacked. Nick Oss came in the game. He got sacked 2 times in the first 2 drives. So
yeah.
I think just the difficulty in sacking Will Howard, because he knows where to look and to dump the ball off at any sign of pressure, is just a great trait to have.
Yeah. Here's Flando. Let's get we have a clip of Chris Kleiman after the game talking about Will Howard and what he did well, specifically in that third quarter when things really turned around for the offense.
What he did in the third quarter is what I have seen throughout camp, and he got into a rhythm, got relaxed, made some really good throws, stepped up in the pocket, ran the football a little bit. We were able to get Deuce on the edge. We were able to do a lot of different things. We were able to get some more of our inside run game going, just kind of some downhill stuff, which was big for us. And so I was really pleased with what we did in the second half offensively.
All right. Well, Chris Kleiman obviously liked what he saw out of the offense. Then he was pretty critical of the offense in the first half. He was not afraid to say that they were not very good.
Yeah.
And it seemed just like a variety of things. I know, and I'm not seeing too many questions about it. It seems like people are pretty happy here after a 55-14 win. But at the time, it's like, play calling, the typical suspects that people are mad at, Cordy Messingham. And I don't know. I just felt like it was just a coalescence. Everything coalesced.
Yeah.
Coalescence. Try to use too big of a word there, but like a bunch of things that came together. Like the receivers weren't very good. They were trying to get Knowles involved. The offensive line was having some struggles. The game was going a route where Kansas was just peeing all over themselves to give you the game. So, like, just get out of the way and don't try and do anything too bad on offense.
The penalties.
And penalties. Yes, correct. Penalties was a huge part of that also. So, that's what this offense is, and sometimes we're going to see some of that.
There was one point where they were on pace to commit 28 penalties in this game.
Yeah.
It's 7 in the first quarter. It would have been 8. The refs tried to put the KU penalty on K-State at the end of the first quarter. It was kind of a weirdly officiated game if I wanted to intervene and kind of say that the organization was pretty bad, that they called the penalty on the wrong team a couple times. They motioned towards the wrong direction. It was a weirdly officiated game in that way.
Shout out to Burke, who sat through 2 minutes of ads to watch us here on YouTube Live. So we very much appreciate that. If you guys have questions, please put them into the chat. You can tweet them at us as well. But I assume for most of you, it's easier to just hop in the chat. What's the ceiling? Tanner asked, what's the ceiling for this team with Will Howard at quarterback?
It's increasing by the game,
Yes.
which is a good thing because that's what you're supposed to see from a true freshman quarterback, better by better. I'm not ready to jump on and say the ceiling is Big 12 championship appearance yet, but he's approaching that closer and closer. Going to Morgantown and kind of doing what he did in the third quarter would probably be the next step for me.
I would just say, if they win next week, I would say you have to at that point say the ceiling is getting to Arlington.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like, winning the thing is a different deal depending on who you play. So I'm going to hesitate some to go that far. But, yeah, I think they're very much flirting with, hey, this is a team that legitimately can make it to the Big 12 championship game even with Will Howard. I definitely do see that now, and I think it's a fair conversation to start having now. And this week, that will probably really kick into effect.
I think something I would add, too, is and it also becomes increasingly not just because of the play of Will Howard. Obviously, that's going to dictate a lot of what the ceiling for this team is, but so is the performance by the other teams in the league. Quite frankly, West Virginia last week against Kansas, not very impressive. Obviously, Kansas State was impressive in the first half, but West Virginia didn't blow me away. I don't think they're head and shoulders better than they were last year. I know Kansas State lost, but that wasn't a great team last year. And then we're kind of seeing Baylor turn into what me and you thought they would be before the year.
Baylor's going to fall apart.
They're kind of bad. So I know that they have their tougher games left, but they still have some very winnable games left too.
Yeah, no, absolutely they do. Yeah, no, the Baylor, Texas, like you're going to say K-State can't beat Texas?
In December in Manhattan?
Yeah, yes, exactly. Mason, you can get all the way out of here. Rays or Dodgers tonight. I mean, come on. No one's listening.
Dodgers.
Whatever. Baseball. So Black Ema, question about A.J. Parker, injury update on A.J. Parker.
No update.
We didn't really get an update. We'll go ahead and Flando, we've got the clip of Kleiman on A.J. Parker here. We could tell you what he said, but we'll just let Chris Kleiman tell you that right now they don't know for sure what's going on with A.J.
I don't. They said he was not going to be available for the second half, and it was 34-7, and I said that's fine, and don't know. We'll find out more probably Sunday or Monday.
So that would be a big blow if you lose AJ. No doubt about that. He's been awesome as a nickel. And it would really suck that, you lost him on special teams on a play that didn't even count. It was blown dead because of a penalty. I don't know. I mean, it
was friendly fire, I think. Yeah.
I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express or become a doctor overnight or anything like that, but, I mean, it just looked like an ankle. Yeah. So hopefully it's just like a turned ankle or something, but I don't know.
I would guess sprained ankle. I would put it this way. Last year, A.J. Parker did miss a chunk of the season, the whole last quarter, maybe a little bit more than that.
It was Kansas, wasn't it? Didn't he get hurt in the Kansas game last year?
It might have been. I don't
think it was.
Really remember that, but that was a fractured ankle, obviously, so a little bit more severe in that nature, and that's why we didn't see him the rest of the season. This one didn't look as bad, at least when he came off the field, because when Parker got injured last year, he couldn't walk. Like he was not even with help, he couldn't put any weight on it. Now he did have to be helped off the field, and he walked gingerly, but there was still some weight being put on his left leg or his left foot, left ankle. And then obviously the cameras on TV probably didn't catch this too. But then as he went to the locker room, he was putting a little bit even more weight on it. So I'm not ready to punch the alarms on it. I mean, it might be tough for him to play next week. Everyone knows what a sprained ankle is, especially if it's second degree, third degree. That thing is going to linger a little bit. But if it's something a little bit lighter than that, then it could be just a 1 week thing. You got to hope it's not a high sprained ankle.
Well, and I mean, K-State is starting to get a little thinner at defensive back, as we've gone along here throughout the season too. So
no T.J. Smith,
Yeah.
and I think obviously I shared on the site and on Twitter before the game, no Lance Robinson today, and I don't know that you're going to see Lance Robinson the rest of the year either.
So yeah, just death by 1,000 cuts. Some of that stuff can really add up. We're seeing it at wide receiver for this team too. Now they keep grinding and finding ways to win, but that'd be another reason that it would really hurt to
And in
lose
an
AJ.
odd way, that they still have a lot of bodies at safety that are in the secondary that are playing well, because obviously A.J. Parker, that would be a big loss, but I don't think you're going to lose him for long term if my speculation is correct. With him and Will Jones at nickel, and you still have three corners that you can trust. Keandre Thomas played pretty well today, and he's the backup now for Justin Gardner and Echo Boydo. You lose T.J. Smith, but they just moved Dwayne Jones back to safety, and he was a starter for the entire season last year.
Yeah.
And now he's your backup at safety. So, to be honest, your secondary is still an upgrade from last year, even with the carnage that you kind of suffered, which shows just the breadth of talent that they've added in the secondary in just a short amount of time.
Another question from Black Emo was about penalties and how much we should be worried about that. 10 for 81 today, and it was, again, pretty much all like in the first quarter, first half.
70% of it.
It is something that has always been there since Chris Kleiman has been here. That has been something, and I've always been somebody that said, like, I would rather see the team play with a bit of an edge.
Yeah.
I always make this point, like, everybody is so sucked into what Bill Snyder 2.0 was like and how much that was discipline. They're not penalized. I went back and looked it up again this week because one thing I remember as a kid, Bill Snyder's best teams, when they were just killing everybody in the late 90s and early 2000s and winning 11 games 6 out of 7 years, they were penalized all the time because they were really good and they were enforcers and they went out there and just beat people up. The 1998 K-State team was penalized 9.8 times per game for over 80 yards per game. That's what they were, and they were the best team. Sorry, DY to Ohio State that year. They were the best team in the country. There's no doubt in my mind that year, and that was Bill Snyder's best team. So I will just say it's not as big a deal to me as it is to some, but it is frustrating, and yes, it is something to monitor. I'm not going to totally ignore it, but I probably care less about it than some people do.
It shouldn't be ignored. I guess you got to pick your battles with the penalty front. I'll say this: the pre-snap penalties are inexcusable.
Yes, correct.
And I think 4 of the 7 in the first quarter were pre-snap. I think they had 3 false starts. That's the stuff that's unacceptable. Now, if you get a penalty for being too aggressive, I'm not really going to wring my hands over it. I like that kind of penalty because I want you to play fast and I want you to play free and I want you to not think as much. But the pre-snap penalties, that's what's inexcusable. And to be honest, today, a lot of it was that. So that's the disappointing part.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like the Kansas game last year, there were a bunch of penalties, and I remember that being a talking point. But that was where it was like, Jerron McPherson spinning the ball or Harry Trotter celebrating afterwards, where they were really being like, hey, we're coming here to wreck shop. Like it was, some smack talk and that kind of thing. And that's the stuff like I can absolutely live with. Let's see. Steve says defensive special teams have been really solid. It seems they're improving. Offense started to get going. Seems like everything's moving in the right direction. I mean, I would agree with that. Like defensively, I mean, DY, did you feel like defensively today things were pretty much on par with what they've been over the last – well, you kept saying like 8 quarters, right, before?
9, because
nine quarters.
We're back to the fourth quarter against Oklahoma. The last 9 quarters going into today, they'd only give up 35 points on 28 drives, and 21 of that was right in a row against Texas Tech in the second half, so only one poor stretch. And, barely over a point per drive is an elite defense. And obviously today did nothing to, throw that off track.
Right.
I mean, half the 14 the KU scored was against the second, third teamers. I mean, they had 8 walk-on players on defense and stopped KU 2 out of 3 times.
Yeah.
Austin Moore, by the way, was actually a linebacker. Kind of turned my head today to walk on. I liked him.
Who was Logan Long coming in for? How was the offensive line rotation? That's a question for you. I did not pay enough attention.
Logan Long didn't play until the end of the game, like garbage time, and he played right tackle. So he was like the 4th offensive tackle, I think, that was used today because BB was the 3rd. So, no, he wasn't really a part of the normal rotation. He got in when the game was 55-7.
But you felt like it was the left side of the line that was struggling there for a while?
Yeah, I think Christian Duffy and Josh Rivas had their share of struggles today. And Torrey Levston probably took a little bit of a step forward. Cooper Beebe was back, and you could tell you get an upgrade with him. Offensive line is still discouraging for me because I think on a couple cases, I think they're getting better, but it's on an individual level as a unit level, I'm not seeing a ton of improvement from that group.
Yeah. Well, and again, they've had to deal with a lot of issues that have kept some cohesion from happening. But let's see, Daniel, what's the number one thing Will Howard needs to improve on?
I would say just continuing. I mean, it's kind of everything that kind of goes together. I mean, his is inexperience, so he just experience.
Right, right. Well, I felt like a lot of times in the first half he was just running for his life. When we talk about the offensive line, that was a lot of what was slowing the offense down. So
yeah, he's got to be careful not to be afraid of a shadow sometimes too, and kind of see ghosts. That's what they call it, the quarterback. Yeah. Because I think, and I understand why it's this way because he was running for his life a few times, but sometimes I think that he kind of lost trust in his offensive line so much sometimes that maybe you take his eyes away from downfield. He had some poor timing with his running back throws there. The two on the same play to Trotter and to Deuce. The one by Deuce was caught, but the timing wasn't great. And he barely got his head around. And so just little things, just detailed stuff that comes with experience.
Philip, what non-starters earn more snaps in the West Virginia game? I'm trying to think if there's somebody that comes to mind right away with that.
Non-starters that earn more snaps?
Yeah, like somebody that played well today that was...
I mean, I don't know that you're going to say, oh, look at one game. Oh, he played good, I played more. I think you're going to see this.
Keon Mosey?
I mean, you would like that, but they said that for 2 weeks. I think they got the roles and their rotations established right now.
Touchdown Pokes.
Pokes take a two touchdown lead.
There's a flag.
The Spencer Sanders run. It's probably holding.
And you know what? This is important to still be talking about here on this live because if Iowa State wins this thing, it's a major hurdle cleared for them. I think you can almost just punch like a ticket to them for them to Arlington. I think for if you're a K-State fan, you'd rather see Oklahoma State win this game. It's holding, by the way, so it's coming back. They call that on Tylan Wallace?
Yeah.
Holding on Tylan Wallace.
It's not holding yet. Now it is. Barely. Oof.
Didn't need to. You didn't need to, Tyler.
He didn't let go quick enough. Because when they run by you, you got to let go. He didn't let go quick enough. But it's kind of a...
Goodness.
I quibble a little bit over the timing of that.
My goodness. All right. This is a good question from Black Ema. Will Morgantown be a bigger road hurdle than Fort Worth?
Yes. Because TCU's not that good. West Virginia might be a little worse. I'm not sure. The Frogs are 1-3 in the Big 12 right now, and I don't think they've been good for 3 or 4 years. So I always slam the door on people that think TCU is still good because I think it's more of a reputation thing than anything at this point. But I'll say it's a little bit more of a road hurdle because Morgantown's tricky for anyone to get to. I know that they charter flights and everything, but that's just a weird trip in general and probably gets, what I want to say, exaggerated even a little bit more during COVID and how everything is kind of tucked pretty tight on road trips and because they're trying to avoid spreading the COVID. But TCU's, I know that people are like Gary Patterson, but people have been overrating TCU for far too long.
I think they're a better team than you think they are. But
when's the last time they were good?
Well, I think just in the context of this year, like to answer this question, I think TCU is a better team than West Virginia. TCU has played Iowa State, Texas, K-State, and Oklahoma. So, yes, they're 1-3, but that's not exactly been an easy schedule. I think they're a better team than West Virginia. I think going to Morgantown is a far tougher road trip in general than vice versa. So, therefore, I think it's about even. I would consider it to be about the same kind of a test as what TCU was, based on what we know right now. That's how I would answer that question.
I mean, it's probably similar, but I would...
Because, West Virginia's played a pretty pillowy, soft schedule. We'll see I don't know what the score is of their game right now. Let me check this real quick. But, they played a very easy schedule so far in the Big 12. So I think it's just a matter of TCU and West Virginia. It's hard to decipher who's the better team there. West Virginia's down 13-7. So, they play total opposite schedules. It's hard to know exactly what you have.
West Virginia did play Oklahoma State.
True. But their wins are Kansas and Baylor in the league, and then Eastern Kentucky. Let's see. Philip, did the receivers earn more of your confidence after today's game?
No. Sebastian Taylor,
slightly.
maybe.
I'd say slightly.
In general, no.
Just because of Seabass.
In general, no. I think just because you asked as a group, right? As a group, I don't really like the wide receiver group still because you have no one besides Sebastian Taylor. Phillip Brooks, yeah, but he didn't do anything as a receiver. He did it all as a return man. So as a group, no. As Sebastian Taylor, yeah, because Sebastian Taylor's probably caught 80 to 90% of those last handful of targets. I mean, every time they throw it to him, it's typically a catch. Him and Briley Moore are very reliable in that way.
So Steve is worried about the three-man front that West Virginia has. They have always been famous for utilizing that kind of a defensive scheme. I mean, in particular under Dana Holgerson, I'm trying to remember what was the deep coordinator there, Tony Gibson, that did a lot of that. Will K-State have enough offense? I mean, I think K-State has enough offense. Like, again, West Virginia's defense statistically has been very good, but against not the strongest of schedules. I think they are a solid defense, a solid to, like above average to solid. Does that sound about right where West Virginia's defense is at? I don't think it's anything insurmountable for K-State at all.
No, and I know he's probably asking that because they have struggled since Chris Kleiman's been there in Manhattan with the odd man front, and maybe that's a thing, but I guess I don't know. But I will say this: K-State 4-0 in the Big 12 right now, but their 4 wins are over 4 teams they beat last year. They haven't beat anyone this year that they didn't last year.
Okay. That's an interesting nugget. I hadn't thought about
that.
They're
2-0 against TCU, 2-0 against KU, 2-0 against Oklahoma, 2-0 against Texas Tech.
Yeah, all right. So some rapid-fire questions here. Black Emo, where does Phillip Brooks' game rank in K-State special teams history? I don't know if he set the record, obviously, for most punt return yards in a game. I don't know that there's been a better. I mean, I'm trying to think historically here.
If you're just looking at the raw numbers historically, that's up there. But it's just hard for me to put it like in pristine lore because I consider the opponent too, and they were a joke today.
Yeah, but I don't know that anybody's had 4 near touchdown. I mean, like Jesse Newell from the Kansas City Star actually had a bunch of really good numbers about it, where he had as many 40+ returns today as like anybody had in the league combined in the last couple of years, or that Kansas had combined in the last 10 years. I mean, it was crazy.
The most 40+ yard punt returns that any Big 12 team had in the last 5 years was 2 in the season. 2
in a season, and he had 4 today. Yeah. So I don't know. To me, opponent or not, that outweighs. I would still say it's the most impressive off the top of my head. I mean, the most impressive special teams day in K-State history. I mean, maybe there's been, if we want to talk about Martin Gramatica came out here and hit a 63-yard field goal, which was the longest without a tee for a long time. But
was David Allen? Didn't he have?
David Allen had he tied at one point for the career punt return touchdown record, but he never had 2 in one game.
Morgan Burns, nothing.
Morgan Burns, I don't know if he ever had 2 in one game. So, I think my answer in short would be, without, looking deeply at all of this, it has to be. I think it does, even as bad as Kansas was. He also asked about Nick Lenners, is the lack of athleticism catching up to Nick Lenners and why he's losing playing time. I think, look, I don't want to rip the kid too much, but you see the difference between Briley Moore catching and running with the ball and then Nick Lenners today with what happened there. It's just Briley Moore's really good, Briley Moore's really, really good. I think that's about as simple as I can put it. Probably.
Yeah, and I don't know. Nick Lenners had to miss a game or two just because of everything that's happened this year. So some of that set him back, and I wonder, some of the athleticism, it seemed like they went away when he tore his ACL. To be quite honest.
Yeah, which sucks. That sucks. I was glad to see him catch the ball, but it was that was definitely a frustrating play where K-State left some points on the board when he could have gotten in. Let's see, 2 starts for Will Howard. Where does he rank in the Big 12 quarterback pecking order? Man, I don't know. That's really hard.
Yeah, and I like the growth he's making, but I don't think I'd put him in the top half if that's what they're suggesting. Not yet.
Yeah. Do you believe Harry Trotter should be the third back? So we're still, I understand we're still getting Harry Trotter questions. We can just say the same things we always say. They trust him. They don't seem to trust, Jacardier Wright nearly as much.
Yeah.
Keon Mosey, it seems like they really like, but skill set wise, he's not the same kind of back really necessarily that Harry Trotter is. So, I guess I would just tell you, if you want some reason to hope there, if you're somebody that's not a fan of Harry Trotter being used the way that he is right now, it's that Keon Mosey does seem to look good every time he touches the ball.
Right. What was the specific question? I'll just answer. Yeah. Do I think Harry Trotter should be
Do you believe Harry Trotter should be the third back?
The third back? Well, Deuce is...
He's really the second back.
Yeah, he's really the second back. I guess I think he should be the third back. I would like someone else to kind of go up there with Mosey. I'm not saying the coach.
Okay, and this is my fault, Robbie. I misread the question. So yes, what she is asking is, should he be the third back and just a short yardage guy as opposed to back number 2?
I would love
That's
that.
my fault.
I would love that role for him much more as the third back. I would. That would be me. I'm not going to sit here and second guess the coaching staff. They know far more than I do. But my preference would be for him to be the third back. Now someone else has to step up and be someone to rely on in the second back. And clearly, I don't feel like that's happened yet. But in my ideal world, that would be Keon Mosey.
But they are moving doesn't it feel like slightly away from Trotter? Slightly away from Trotter?
Today, it felt like a little bit of that. But not in the way of Jacardia Wright like people wanted. I think they're getting farther away from him. And
Yes.
he was.
Yes.
And to be honest, he kind of showed some stuff today that kind of cemented to me why they are the way they are with him. Because while everyone was having kind of success today and kind of doing what they're supposed to do, there was a couple runs, and I was wondering, was like, Jacardia, what are we doing here? So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really even. I mean, I know he had a couple of carries. I didn't notice much out of Jacardia Wright. Just doesn't seem to be popping quite as much, here lately either. Getting down to really like the last one or two that I'm seeing here. So Tyler, more satisfying win this year or last year. I mean, as fun as it was to laugh and have a great time today and see everything that was happening and the progress that's being made, and last year to me is far more satisfying just because it had so much more juice before the game. Like Kansas was chirping, Kansas was talking. You had the miles to go thing.
They actually sold out their stadium.
Right, like it was Kansas to crush the hopes of Kansas like that. It was also the first year of Les Miles v. Chris Kleiman, and we're trying to cement that this guy's the better hire. To me, last year was definitely more satisfying, even though this game in some ways was funnier, more awesome. Like you got some more cheap shots in.
Yeah, I would say it like this, and I think you're basically saying it without saying it. Last year was more satisfying for K-State. This year was more embarrassing for KU.
Yeah, yep. I think that's exactly what it is. Yep, 100%. Did you have any questions from Twitter you want to get to, DY?
I haven't looked. Flando,
is there anything on the boards, Flando, that we need to address here?
Not on the thread that I started, but I also haven't looked at all.
I guess
this is great live TV.
Well, I guess I would just close here then by looking ahead to next week. And I know we've talked about this some, but I mean, this every week it feels like becomes a bigger and bigger game. Maybe not so much this week, but it feels to me a lot like, I think the vibe around it will be a lot like the TCU game, where it's, hey, just find a way to go win this thing. Call yourselves 5-0 in the Big 12. You have all this momentum. And then just go play with some house money and see what happens coming up after that, because it's Oklahoma State after that, right? And the Cowboys right now are looking like they're going to put the finishing touches on Iowa State. They're up by 10 with the ball with 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So you'll have your shot at both of these teams coming up after the game against West Virginia. You just find a way to win, and now you're playing with real house money in the back half of that schedule.
I will say something that Kansas State has going for them, and that they actually increased these numbers today, which is kind of surprising because they were already elite in this category. Like, I think they might have been number one in the nation in both. Turnover margin, field position, those two things in this year, because every team is making a lot more mistakes. You listen to any coach on any conferences, teleconference, the weekly league. Like, we're on the Big 12 teleconference calls, but the other leagues are having them too. You always hear a group of them say, you look around the league and there's a lot of teams that are still not sharp and we're already in the middle of the season. It's because of all the disruptions that everyone's dealing with COVID. So when you are a team that you can rely on every week to be at least +2 or +3 in the turnover margin in a year where everyone's making a lot of mistakes, and then your field position, which Kansas State's field position is now probably going to be over 10 yards greater than the college football average right now, which is ridiculous because they did nothing to hurt that today. And I think it's first in the Big 12 now by almost 7 yards through field position. I mean, we're talking about rare air here in that department. So if they do those two things, just because nobody's sharp this year, like that's hard to beat because everyone is beating themselves.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to make that point too, because people talk about the penalties and it's all like undisciplined. How many times do we see that word around this team's undisciplined? I would say actually they're not. I mean, they do have a bit of a penalty issue, but they're unbelievably disciplined when it comes to taking care of the ball and turnover margin and like special teams, which is an area to me of a lot of discipline, and they've been excellent there. So I don't think it's fair to characterize the whole team as being undisciplined because they do things like that so well.
Yeah, and I always have a little hard time calling penalties discipline too, because I don't know if people know this, but more than half of the penalties for a football team is not because of discipline. It's because of inexperienced or just not being as talented as the other guy and having to hold him because you're going to get beat anyway. That has nothing to do with discipline. That's good. That has everything to do because you just got your butt whipped in a one-on-one battle, and now you have to cheat so your quarterback doesn't get killed. That's not discipline. Discipline is the late penalty, the personal foul after the play and stuff like that, or that's inexcusable. I would still excuse the ones that are a little bit more aggressive in nature, and you kind of get a personal foul. It's a little bit of a 50-50 call that you tell the ref, let us play a little bit. That's not even discipline to me because it's football. You have to play with aggressive fire and passion. Other ones completely after the play, I don't love those. And then we're talking about, over half the penalties today, maybe over half the penalties this year, when we're talking about discipline, it's also not discipline. It's because you have an offensive line that has no experience.
Right.
So many pre-snap penalties because they haven't been through the fire and been through the fight. So I have a hard time, and I get annoyed sometimes when people say, oh, these penalties, there's no discipline. Most of the time, penalties has nothing to do with discipline.
Yeah. That's some good stuff right there, DY. That's some good stuff. I think it will be a very close game next week. I would anticipate that. This is a monkey that K-State really needs to get off their back in general. West Virginia has been a tricky opponent. It's been a difficult place for K-State to go play. All of that stuff. It's been since 2015 was the last win, correct, over West Virginia?
I was going to say, as the KSO's existence, the only team we have not seen Kansas State beat in the existence of KSO is West Virginia. They got pounded twice by Will Greer. Those two games were brutal. I think
in 2016, K-State absolutely should have won the game. Actually, shout out to Byron Pringle, who's come a long way. It was a Byron Pringle drop that really killed K-State in Morgantown in 2016. The
most disappointing game might have been last year because West Virginia was not good.
So. Last year, definitely. You were that close to a 9-win regular season last year if you take care of business in that one. So,
yeah, that was because that was probably the most disappointing loss on last year's schedule.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No question.
Yeah.
Oklahoma State and Baylor, they
didn't look very competitive, but it was definitely the most disappointing, yeah. And
then this year, nothing's going to top Arkansas State.
Yeah.
We pretend like that was not the start of the season.
Yeah. Let's see here. Joe, real quick, just since you got these in, well, these will be the last questions that we take, and I do appreciate all of you guys that have hung out here throughout this. But Joe asked about why doesn't Keenan Garber play? We need answers. Well, Keenan Garber did. He was out there today.
He got a catch today.
He was out there.
He's starting to get more time. But the thing is they're still trying to find answers at wide receiver. Garber's going to get his chances. This is his third or fourth game he's played this year. So
I was going to say he played last week too.
Yeah,
or 2 weeks ago.
And he played against Arkansas State because there was a lot of receivers out that game. They started DJ Render and Eric Hommel that week. So, they played almost 10 wide receivers. So if you're not playing, then you're probably just aren't good enough at this point. It's not like they aren't playing.
They're trying to get everybody.
This staff
hands on deck.
has played over 80 guys this year. If you're asking why a player isn't playing, it's because he probably hasn't done enough.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts, DY?
No. Keenan Garber probably. I guess to tack on to that, he probably is starting to maybe earn a little bit of playing time because there is no Wyking Gill and there is no Joshua Youngblood, so there's going to be opportunity there. And he did have a nice catch and run after the catch today, so. That's good. And then in general, I think if I have one or two or three concerns still, a little bit was, the penalties, and 7 of them in 1 quarter is not good in general. Doesn't mean you're not disciplined. I'm going to punch that in there again.
Oh, boy.
And then A.J. Parker, at the end of the day, I think if they lost him for any extended period of time, I think that would be pretty crushing because I think he's the best player on the defense this year.
Can I let you in on a little something that just happened here?
What's up?
Gavin Potter replied to my tweet video.
Yeah.
Gavin Potter said, Ray Lewis missed tackles too. I'd be mad if I had to play against me for 2 more years too. Wow. Boy, he just plays right into that gimmick, doesn't he?
Man, dude, Gavin Potter, if you're watching this, I bet you aren't, but you probably need to call it a night when you lose 55-14. Like, that's when you go back to the lab and you work and you don't talk.
Oh, my goodness. All right, well...
you're busy on Twitter talking to a Kansas State media person after losing by 41. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right, on that note...
Yeah, we're going to get out.
Flando, you have anything?
Love you guys.
Flando loves you.
Flando loves you.
Flando loves you.
Bye.
KSO loves
Tell your
you.
friends.
Tell your friends.